How you doing today, everybody? Fantasy Philosophy back and ready to go with a little Week 8 recap. I'd like to welcome back Ant. Had a little bit of a tough week, but he's back. He's ready to go, ready for action.
It was just work.
It was just work. We got Kev back. Had a great week last week in Fantasy Philosophy production, so we had to have him back for another week. We gave him an extension on his contract, and he's back here for another week. We got Pete back, as always, ready to talk some Will Fuller, ready to go, better than ever. So, just a little recap. You know, we had a great time last week watching football. Pretty exciting week. Towards the end, I would say. You know, the first couple games had that weather. Definitely. But we actually we did a draft on draft.com, and it was tons of fun. Mm-hmm. You know, we all hung out before the games, ran through a draft together. You know,
it's like old times.
Just like old times. And, you know, I hate to say it, but Ant came away with the win because of his confidence on Deshaun Watson and DeAndre Hopkins. I mean, how could you beat that combination?
I rolled the dice.
Definitely rolled the dice.
It paid off.
I mean, I got to admit, I was pretty low on them last week. I had no confidence in that offense, but got to give credit where credit's due. Kevin, Pete, we're all over Houston's offense.
Yeah, baby.
All parts of it. So make sure you tune in. And, you know, we're all up here trying to give you advice. You pick which advice you want to listen to, obviously. But at the end of the day, we're here for you, trying to help you out. So let's jump into it. Before we start, actually, Ant, you know, like I said, he had a rough week, but he actually had time to get that beautiful haircut. And he actually, you got a story for us from the barbershop?
Yeah, so I was sitting down, getting my haircut right, and me and my barber, we always talk fantasy. It was funny, we both drafted Hunter Henry in the summer, and we were kind of pissed in the beginning of the year, but then he started picking it up. So now we're both happy about that. But other than that, I was hearing some other barber ask my barber. He was like, yo, I think I'm going to trade my Melvin Gordon away for Tom Brady and Brandon Cooks. And in my head, I was like, dude, no way. Don't do it. Running back is hard to come by in this league. It really is. And Melvin Gordon is a top back. And then he also said he had Gurley. So if you had those that 1-2 punch, it could take you all the way, all the way to the dance. So I'm saying he should have kept his guys. But he planned on giving away Gordon, getting Brady and Cooks, and then he was going to give Brady away for Rivers and Ajayi. So then, in a sense, he would get Cooks, Ajayi, and Rivers. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I'm definitely not a fan of Ajayi at all. He's kind of, we always go back and forth on this show. We did a Beast or Bust section on him. We were trying to figure him out a little bit more, but after last week's game against the Ravens, I'm ready to drop. I'm ready to bench him for the rest of the year. I mean, until he does something. So I wouldn't go for Ajayi. But I would stick with Melvin Gordon. I think.
Stick with those two. That 1-2 punch. I mean,
I think you got to look into this team a little bit more. He's got Gordon and Gurley. Check out his wideouts. If he's got decent wideouts, stick with those two backs. You don't need anything big. You need something to carry you. Gurley and Gordon are going to produce.
Right.
But if your wideouts are that bad and you need Cooks, then send it. It's kind of a personal choice depending on how you like your team to look.
If he were to do it, I definitely wouldn't go for that second trade.
Yeah,
the Rivers. I would definitely keep Brady and Cooks. If he really needed a quarterback and a wideout that bad, he's got the depth at running back. I would potentially do that trade as long as the other pieces are there.
Right. I hear you. I didn't get too much information, like it was just in the barbershop. But from what it looks like, I wouldn't have done it. But in these scenarios, maybe you could have, depending on what the rest of his team looked like.
Yeah, I mean, you never know with barbershop talk, anything.
You never know. Yeah.
But, it's always so difficult to predict, when X player is trading to Y player, what's going to happen because we don't know the team. We don't know how the league is or how the league's going to play out. Right. We played with some guys in the past that had no idea what they were doing, and they would trade away anyone. So
that's why they're gone.
That's why they're not in the league anymore.
One person is still in the
league. So you never know what trades, but that's a good point to bring up. All right, let's jump into the Week 8 recap here. We had a lot of games that were, I guess, more exciting than others. Obviously, Seattle and Houston was a great game, but the 1 o'clock games were hit with that nor'easter on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. Tons of crappy, rainy, windy weather affecting New England, affecting New York, affecting Philly, affecting Washington, and affecting Buffalo. So, some of those games were a little bit low scoring, maybe focus more on the running backs. Did you guys see any noticeable effects from that weather that would maybe say, you know what, don't worry about that outcome this week because it was the weather that really took over there?
I like to start. I think Des Bryant, I want to bring up
Pete.
first.
There you go.
There we go.
He definitely there was the time where Dak hit a beautiful pass, and we've seen that same exact play. If you watch, any of these big networks, that's their play going in between scenes. They show that play in the back of the corner. He snags that ball, but he happened to drop it because I think the wet gloves and whatever. It's a tough catch to begin with. When you add the elements, it's a tough catch. I think he would have had a touchdown and would have had over 10 fantasy points.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely tell the rain was definitely affecting a lot of wide receivers, a lot of drop passes in those early games. Anything else you guys were like, oh wow, this rain is not,
Yeah, and going off that, Dak Prescott had his worst performance of the year.
Right? They gave
How many
Zeke
points?
33
I
carries.
think he got
they gave
7
Zeke.
points. Zeke
Oh, good,
was
man.
just eating the entire game,
Yeah.
which is a good formula for the Cowboys. But
Yeah.
usually Dak punches it in one or two times. Also, Matt Ryan, you saw some fumbled snaps. You could just tell that a lot of offenses were being affected in a poor way with the weather. I expect to see a lot of bounce back performances from those games this upcoming week.
Yeah.
You got something for a second?
Just real quick, going off of Matt Ryan, yeah, he couldn't handle the ball really in the Meadowlands, and he fumbled twice or whatever it was. However, though, he finished with 15.9 fantasy points, which is okay. It's decent for Matt Ryan, but just because of the weather and stuff, I don't think it's an excuse for his play. He's still not up to par with where people drafted him, and frankly, I don't think he's probably the only exception to all the people improving after the weather. He's just not. I don't know. He's just not the same.
If he was in that weather against a tougher defense, you could have seen him with sub 10 fantasy points. So I mean,
Even watching the game, you could tell whether or not the decisions he was making, the way he looked.
Right.
Yeah.
He's not all there.
That offense is just.
I
not
still think that
clicking,
confidence is not there yet. I don't think you can rely on that offense. I mean, Sanu showed some nice plays, and Tevin Coleman obviously, as we talked about last week. But the weather was there, and you got to deal with it in fantasy. That's why I think it's important. You always check the weather, especially for kickers and quarterbacks.
Yeah.
And we even saw wide receivers, but it could also affect it in the positive way. We had Rob Kelly score a touchdown, had some good looks, had some good rushes, and he might not see the ball if it was a nice day. Cousins could have been passing like Chris Thompson. So it goes both ways. Definitely goes both ways. Let's go into the a hot topic, at least for our show, the last couple of weeks. The Vikings backfield. We were pretty split on it last week between Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon. I think we were 50-50 as to who to play last week. McKinnon had 14 for 50 rushes, 50 yards, and 1 touchdown with 72 receiving yards. And then you had Latavius Murray with 19 rushes, but for only 39 yards. So the efficiency is still there for McKinnon, and Murray's still struggling against Cleveland. Cleveland's a good rush defense, but they're still struggling with less than 2 yards per carry. So, what do we do going forward? Are we sticking with McKinnon, or are we still giving Murray a chance?
I'm going to stick with McKinnon big time because obviously either way, even if they give McKinnon 20 and Murray 20, which they did, touches, obviously you could see that McKinnon's going to give more fantasy output and even more output for the team. He got a red zone touch, and he punched it into the goal line, punched it into the end zone, and you didn't see Murray get a red zone touch. The 19 carries for only 39 yards, that's not promising that for anything that makes me say, give him less and give more to McKinnon because obviously he's the guy.
Yeah.
And very involved in the passing game, which is huge.
Definitely. You guys agree?
Yeah, definitely. Coming into this week, I actually thought Murray was going to be more heavily relied on, but in the backfield, you can just see that the Vikings, they just believe in McKinnon. You could just tell he's the more talented back.
Definitely.
They use him in the passing downs. He's just the guy there. I think Murray's going to start to fade his way out. McKinnon's going to get that featured role eventually.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. I just don't think Latavius is going to be faded out completely. He'll still be in the mix. But yeah, if you look at the past 4 games where Dalvin Cook wasn't there, McKinnon stepped up 3 out of those 4 games. So I would rely heavily on McKinnon.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to bring this guy up, but Isaiah Crowell, who did have a decent game in this game, although his yards per rush were, after that one breakout rush, his first rush was like a 27-yard touchdown. Other than that, he didn't really do much. But I think that Latavius Murray can be comparable to Isaiah Crowell in that they're not getting these heavy yard per carry games. They're pretty slow,
they need a lot of
basic
volume
runners.
to even do anything.
Exactly. And, going forward, you can't trust these
Yeah,
guys.
it's very difficult to trust somebody like
Right.
that. You got to roll with the more talented back.
Exactly. All right,
There's
so
talent.
that was an okay game in London. at 9:30 if you were up to see it. I actually woke up to watch it. I don't know if you guys did or not, but it was all right. It was an okay game. I had a feeling had a good game. So finally he scored his touchdown.
Finally got in the end zone.
And had a feeling, and Thielen got in the end zone. So
Oh, yeah.
someone else that we all, actually almost the entire fantasy community had a big feeling on. Actually had a pretty poor game as to what we expected. We expected this to be kind of his breakout game. Rushed for under 2 yards per carry, but did have a lot of receiving yards. Joe Mixon, 11 for 18, but also that 91 receiving yards. So, and, against the Indianapolis Colts, we were expecting, maybe 20 rushes for 100 yards and that touchdown, but didn't happen. So what are we doing with Joe Mixon going forward? Is he a matchup play, or are we playing him week to week?
I wouldn't say he's a matchup play. I would say you would play him week to week to be safe because any of these games he's either putting up decent numbers or he's going to go off. I think it's just the Bengals offense as a whole is not clicking. They won 24-23 against an Indianapolis team where they should have blown out, and Mixon should have gotten all the carries to end out the game. So, it was just game flow. Andy Dalton's not really handling that offense really well, and I think you wanted to add something.
I would definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
The Bengals have one of the worst offensive lines in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Mixon gets touched pretty much at the line of scrimmage every carry. Going forward, I think you have to trust this guy. He's the most talented back there. Since the new coordinator came in, he's been getting double-digit carries, and Hill and Bernard have been losing a lot of their volume. He's going to progress pretty well. As long as they keep getting him involved, he's going to be a good starter every week, I think.
Yeah,
Okay.
I agree, because if you look at the other carries between Hill and Gio, he out-touched them combined. So he's the guy there for them. Even though you like to see him get it going against a really pretty bad defense, he still gets. You've seen that even if one touch, he can take it for a big play, and it can be very big for you, and that's all you really need, which is good. So I'd have him in my lineup going forward.
All right. I think he's definitely an interesting guy to look for going forward. Another guy that we should all be keeping an eye on this week, Ezekiel Elliott, walking into court today in New York with his red bottoms on, looking like a stud as always. But we got to make sure we keep an eye on him. Pete, I think you have a quick update as to what the percentage is that he might be playing for the rest of the season.
Right. Well, so it looks like it's going to be 85% in Zeke's favor that we will see him for the rest of the season, and 15% otherwise, because his legal team, they got to be the best around, obviously. I mean, even if they lose this appeal, there's still another option that they can apply. So it's never ending, and the odds are totally in his favor. So I wouldn't sell him. I would so buy him and try to tell him, he's going to be suspended, the owner. But for sure, if you got him, keep him, play him, and be confident.
All right, Kev, I know you own Dak Prescott, and you're always cheering for Dallas. I mean, you're a Dallas guy at heart. I really think you are.
I love him.
With Romo, now Dak. Continuing.
It's your team. So, if Zeke is suspended, are you still rolling with Dak week in and week out? And are you confident in that Cowboys team to win and maybe make the playoffs without him?
You got to go with Dak, I think, with that offensive line. He has all day to throw. He's a great playmaker. He's a talented QB.
Yeah.
Obviously, I think his value takes a little bit of a hit without Zeke there, because that defense really has to account for Zeke when he's in.
Yeah,
but you still need to play Dak every week, I think, consistently. He's a starting quarterback in fantasy, 100%.
Yeah, definitely agree. I mean, he did have a bad week last week, but again, we had the weather being an issue. So, all right, so let's move on to Seattle versus Houston, the big story of the week, maybe one of the best games of the season so far. And I really think that single game saved the entire week, the entire NFL that week, because
it was boring up until
it
that
was
point.
very boring. The weather was causing problems. I mean, the NFL is already having problems, 15% down in viewership. So that game definitely, revitalized the NFL week and maybe even the rest of the season. Now, Deshaun Watson having a hell of a day, breaking through that Seattle offense, and Russell Wilson having a hell of a day. So let's start with Seattle first. And we know you're a big Russell Wilson guy.
Yeah.
Do you think that it was the type of game that he was able to have because it was a shootout, or do you think he just has that pure skill that he can continue to do that week in and week out?
It's a good question. I think week in and week out, he could get you 20 or above points. However, they were in that shootout, so he was needed to throw the ball. If you take a look at the running backs, they got nothing because all they did was just throw the ball. towards the end of the game because Houston kept scoring. Deshaun Watson kept scoring. So he really had to put up those numbers. But if the game flow was a little different and they were up, had a lead, they would try and feature the running backs a little more. But since, like I said, game flow, he scored like 35 points. Meanwhile, he could normally get you like 20 to 25, especially in this part of the season where Russell Wilson really shines.
Definitely. And, we had some surprise breakout games from someone like Paul Richardson, who we're going to talk about in Beast or Bust, had 6 for 105 and 2 touchdowns. Great game for him. Jimmy Graham scored 2 touchdowns after all the reports saying, we're going to trade him for a left tackle. A pretty good game for that offense as a whole. The one thing that you can't rely on at all, 5 rushing yards from that Seattle offense. Would you even roster any Seattle running back at this point?
I wouldn't.
Thanks, Pete.
Now, listen. They did just trade for a left tackle, Dwayne Brown. It's not Dwayne Reed. Jesus. So, they have a better offensive line now. I mean, at least a little bit. Do you maybe think? Okay. All right.
The only one that I would ever think of is J.D. McKissick because he's involved in the passing game, and that would have to be PPR. If not,
how many touches did he get, Pete?
It's PPR. I'm taking him. That's the only one.
I know, but
you're never going to play Rawls or Lacey and pray for a touchdown.
You can't pick any.
None of those guys are relevant. None of them need to be
It's almost
rostered.
like the New England backfield, but they're not producing. That's like
there's like 4 or 5 backs, and they're not doing anything.
I don't know. I feel like McKissick, he could get, if he gets more carries and more touches, I think he would be a lot more valuable.
I would say he's the most talented back that they have.
They keep giving it to Lacey and Rawls.
Yeah,
so
it's
like,
not going to work out there. It's the Russell Wilson
it's
show.
Weird,
And it's unbelievable how Russell can still produce without a running game.
Right.
And
They know
no
he's gonna
offensive
pass
line.
it. They
It's
know he's going to
unbelievable.
pass it.
Ridiculous.
And he's just throwing it. Those playmakers, he's got Lockett, he's got
But
Lincoln
that's what I'm
Richardson,
saying.
he's got
That's what I'm
Graham.
saying.
Baldwin
Houston, not
didn't
the
even do
best
anything.
defense.
Right,
Now,
I
if he
know,
goes
yeah.
up against a tough defense like a Denver or
Russell. Well,
Buffalo
Houston's not
or-
a bad D though.
right, but
they're not
they
the
could be
best.
better.
Right.
Now, what happens when he goes up against that tough defense? Do you think he gets shut down because they're a one-sided offense? What do you think? Kev?
Well, okay, go ahead, Kev.
It's definitely easy to shut him down. I think he's actually kind of a toss-up kind of play. He's a great quarterback, but he's very inconsistent in the beginning of the year. I know he heats up towards the end of the year.
Yeah.
But you got to as of now, you got to play him no matter what matchup, man. He's a great starting quarterback in fantasy.
I definitely agree. I actually traded Drew Brees for Russell Wilson and Adam Thielen earlier in the year, and that shows to not be such a great trade right now.
I think Breeze will
We'll
come
see
around
going
soon
forward,
for you,
but let's go to the other side of the ball. The biggest surprise of them all, Deshaun Watson and that Houston offense, unbelievable, not phased, and now they're matchup proof. So, what do you guys think about them going forward? And Pete, what do you have to say about Will Fuller?
I mean, you know what? You look around. If you rewind a week, everybody and their mother is telling you to sit Will Fuller, sit Lamar Miller, and think about sitting Watson. And I'm here. Kev's backing me up, and I'm saying play all these guys because look what they did. This is the highest powered offense in football, and they backed it up. Fuller, he actually got the volume this week. He got 5 catches, 125 yards, and 2 touchdowns. As soon as I saw the update pop up that he got that bomb, I said, there it is. That's all we needed. And he's relevant again. And then he backs it up with another touchdown and a couple more catches. This guy's insane. He's got an easy schedule going forward. He needs to be in your lineup every week. Miller needs to be in your lineup every week. Watson needs to be in your lineup every week. And obviously D-Hop will be. So, like I said, that's the team you want. If I could pick one team to own, that's the team I would have.
Kev, is there any thought in your mind that we need to pump the brakes on everything Pete just said?
Absolutely not. Let me give you some stats here.
All right, let's hear it. Kev.
This is a rookie quarterback from last year. Through 6 weeks, 1,500 yards, 7 touchdowns, 3 rushing touchdowns, and 67 yards. That's Dak Prescott, the superstar from last year, right? Everyone was in love with him. Deshaun Watson this year. Through 6 weeks, 1,700 yards, 19 touchdowns, 269 rushing yards, and 2 rushing touchdowns.
Oh my Lord.
He's incredible.
He's got the record.
You
for
have to
Warner.
play everybody on that team. All fantasy players. DeAndre Hopkins, Will Fuller, Lamar Miller, Deshaun Watson, every single week they're in your lineup, no matter what.
And after everything he just said, is Deshaun Watson your fantasy MVP so far?
I would say so. Because, where did you get this guy?
Exactly.
You either drafted him in the last round, everyone laughed at you in your draft. Oh, yeah, he's not going to do it. No. You either got him in the last round or you picked him up.
Yeah.
fantasy MVP. At first, I thought it was Alex Smith. I was really high on Alex Smith. I liked Alex Smith. Still like Alex Smith going forward. But Deshaun Watson brings another element to this game that we really haven't seen since like a Cam Newton
Or Michael Vick.
or Michael Vick even. Yeah. I'm very hesitant to rely. You're gonna hate me, Will Fuller. Okay, 11 catches and 7 of them are touchdowns. That number is not
But
sustainable.
He added a couple more
He
catches.
did. He
after
did.
that,
He ruined
which
his
is great.
ratio. He
But
ruined his
it's-
100%
but it's great for
touchdown
fantasy owners
ratio.
to look at that.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is that it's just not sustainable. He is a week in and week out. He's a starter. He should be in your starting lineup. You should never bench him
Right.
ever.
100%.
100%. But you can't. You just don't think that you're gonna get 2 touchdowns from Will Fuller with 3 catches every game. Yeah, you get 80 yards and a touchdown. Yeah, you get 100 yards, no touchdown. But don't think that that's sustainable. Just
You know what?
mathematically
You know what?
speaking.
I have to say I've been the same wavelength as you with Will Fuller. But honestly, man,
Disagree?
he has to prove me wrong before I take him out of my lineup.
One thing I just
He
like
has
to
prove
add
me
quick
wrong.
is Lamar Miller has been doubted all year. Foreman's going to take away from him. We've seen nothing but Lamar Miller all day, every day. Carries in the passing game. He's the guy, and I don't know why people are doubting him or why they ever did.
I could tell you why though. 21 carries for 54 yards.
Right, but look at the passing game.
He's
the best receiving back on the team, and they love to pass.
And he was versing Seattle, but still his rushing, he's I think the highest he's ever rushed is 75 yards.
But
He's
that's
not a
what you're
bell
looking
cow,
for.
but yeah, exactly. He's putting up points. I agree
He's
with
an
you, Pete.
all-around back.
You
and
can rely on that guy.
He's a great fit for
the new
Watson.
offense opens it up for Lamar.
Yeah,
exactly.
He's a great fit.
Yeah.
And the same thing for Fuller. They got DeAndre Hopkins on the other side.
Right. Who do you cover? Who do you
Exactly.
cover now?
You're gonna
Right,
lean
Fuller's
toward
always
you're gonna
on
lean
the-
towards D Hop because he's a star.
Exactly.
Right.
And then you got Fuller's speed. He can take the top off the
50-yard
defense.
touchdown.
Fuller did score one on Richard Sherman last night.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Burned
man,
him right in the corner.
You gotta
Oh,
play.
sick.
You gotta play Fuller. Maybe he
He's
won't
sick.
put
He's
out
sick.
a lot,
He's
but
sick.
Don't get me wrong.
boom or bust kind
He's-
of guy.
he's good.
All right, speaking of boomer bust, let's move on to the last Sunday night game. We had Matt Stafford putting up 423 yards, 18 fantasy points against the number 1 Pittsburgh defense, and he has Green Bay, Cleveland, Chicago coming up.
Right.
Is Matt Stafford relevant again, or are we still keeping him out of our fantasy lineups?
In my situation, in our league, I own Philip Rivers and Marcus Mariota. And I'm going to try to do whatever I can to get Matthew Stafford on my roster.
Ooh,
Because
okay.
I like him over who I got. I like his schedule coming up. And to get 18 fantasy points without throwing a touchdown, that's insane.
And that's what I was
He
just
had
gonna
no
bring up.
turnovers. He looked really good. He's got to have some of those playmakers make some catches. There were
Yeah.
some difficult catches, but he's got to have one of them come down with that, and he has a huge day.
Yeah, so Kev and Ant, he had that great throwing day, but
Yeah.
I think it was 2 or 3 red zone trips where he couldn't punch the ball in, and
Yeah.
it affected him in fantasy. Also affected him in the game because they were only down 5 points, and they could have won that game quite easily. And I was waiting for them to throw that in so Le'Veon Bell could get his more rushes, but at the end of the day, Matt Stafford did still have a good game. Are you worried about his ability to punch it into the end zone because he doesn't have his typical, I guess, year for touchdowns? Or are you with Peter here and you're trying to go grab him?
I'd be with Pete. Stafford's a really good quarterback in the league. I would be a little bit worried about him due to the lack of their run game. I mean, they really can't get anything going with these running backs. I got Abdullah in my league. He doesn't help me out too much. Sometimes he'll have a good game,
Yeah.
but they got Washington there, and then they got Riddick. If they can get something going in the run game, then maybe it would help. But I would still roll with him because he's a good quarterback. That's about it.
I'm gonna say I agree with Pete. You can rely on him. The matchups he's got for the next couple of weeks, great matchups. And we also got to remember the Steelers have the second ranked
Right.
defense against quarterbacks, and he
Only-
still was able to put up 18.
He put up double and then some of what they average.
Right.
give
Exactly.
to the opposing quarterback.
And I mentioned this
Exactly.
last week
Rely on
about
him.
about Pittsburgh playing Detroit. I mentioned how they shut out the Chiefs or held them to like under 10 yards and a half, which is
Right.
absurd. And then they did the same thing to the Bengals. The Steelers D is for real, man, and they're gonna look good going forward, I
For
think.
sure.
Yeah, definitely. All right. So it sounds like we just have a trade alert. Is that true? I think we had a tweet on our Twitter account at FNTSY Philosophy.
I would say a pretty big trade. I mean, the 49ers, they got Beathard right now at starting quarterback, and they had Hoyer. But now they're bringing in Jimmy Garoppolo from the Patriots for only a 2018 second-round pick.
Wow.
Now, if that's me, And if I'm the general manager for the 49ers, I just did a hell of a trade there. Because Garoppolo, for sure, is a franchise quarterback. He's somebody you can build a team around.
All right. Now, we understand that that's great for franchises and football, but we only care about fantasy on the
Right,
show.
I mean, if
how
you
does that
can-
affect... Are you going to pick him up, or are you going to pick up any San Francisco wide receiver?
Hopefully, you're owning Pierre Garcon. I think his
You think
value
that
goes
boosts
up.
his value?
Yeah, I think it does. 100%. 100%. Yeah.
Garcon?
I totally think Garcon is now a little more valuable. He's been putting up good numbers.
Definitely.
Decent numbers with bad quarterback play. Now you could add in some mediocre, maybe good quarterback play, and we'll see what happens.
Absolutely.
It'll take
That
a
whole
while.
offense gets an upgrade.
For
Yeah.
sure.
I actually, before last week, I picked up the Cardinals D because I was ready to stream them against the Niners. If Garoppolo plays,
Yeah.
I don't know if
Might
I'm
have to
playing him.
store it.
I don't know if I'm
Second
playing
guess
him.
yourself.
Yeah,
to be
and
honest.
I was just about to say, after that Arizona defense, it'll be interesting for Jimmy Garoppolo.
Yeah.
He gets the Giants, a bye, Seattle, and then at Chicago, at Houston. It's going to be difficult for him, but I'm pretty excited to watch him play.
Absolutely.
Definitely. All right, so there you have it. There's our little Week 8 recap for Fantasy Philosophy. Make sure to check us out on Twitter at FNTSY Philosophy, and look for our next video. We'll be doing beasts or busts from this past week. So there you have it. Thank you so much. See you next time.